you mentioned the Ryan plan,
Yeah.
the plan from Congressman Paul Ryan to put some limits, some brackets on the welfare state, which was it got an interesting reaction actually from some people on the left, but I was also intrigued by its reaction on the right because you had some sort of reform-minded conservatives who liked a lot of the ideas in it, the means testing and whatnot, but also some on the libertarian right, and the libertarian right is a target in your book because you see at least some on the libertarian right as unwilling to make peace with the reality of a welfare state. And I want to offer up what may be a defense of the libertarian right position, and it comes from actually again a quote not of yours, but actually from someone you quote in the book, James Q. Wilson.
Okay.
Something of a patron saint around here, as
Sure.
you know. So, but you're right. The political scientist James Q. Wilson explained how big government breeds bigger government. Quote: "Once politics was about only a few things. Today, it is about nearly everything. Once the legitimacy barrier has fallen, political conflict takes a very different form. New programs need not await the advent of a crisis or an extraordinary majority, because no program is any longer new. It is seen rather as an extension, a modification, or an enlargement of something the government is already doing. Since there is virtually nothing the government has not tried to do, there is little it cannot be asked to do." So even though Wilson is somebody who's sympathetic to the arguments that you advance in your book, I want to put that quote forward as something that may bolster the position of those who take a kind of categorical objection to certainly the welfare state in its current form, or even a much smaller one, which is that once you have overcome this legitimacy barrier, as he calls it, the political economy involved is such that it's impossible to push back against it. So what seems at one level an overly principled objection to the welfare state actually has a prudent core. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think it's there's just a truckload of data points to support the idea that this is a slippery slope sort of dilemma, that once the government starts doing a few things, it winds up doing more and more of those things and more of other things. The problem is that I'm not sure that there's any practical, feasible, or even defensible way to say that in a country that's very different from what it was in 1787, that the actual operations of the government should be exactly what they were. That even, you know, there are libertarians for whom Abraham Lincoln is a great villain, because the expansions of government in the early 1860s, the argument goes, were again these kind of slippery slope things. They set us on the road towards federal involvement in all sorts of areas that had theretofore been considered unthinkable, illegitimate. But I think that we need to be constantly alert to, concerned about, and on guard against these slippery slope trends. But at the same time, it seems to me those can't simply be the last word on the question. We can't say, because there is the potential, demonstrated in fact, lurking in theory, for any sort of government enterprise to wind up being sprawling, stupid, intrusive, on the margins in America from time to time, bullying and thuggish. Therefore, everything the government might do that might help people ought to be something we steer clear of. It seems to me that the thing, taking all the wise points libertarians have made, it still seems to me that the enterprise of adapting the founders' framework and constitution to 20th and 21st century American needs requires statesmanship. That is, requires simultaneously great fealty to the high principles that animate the American experiment, and at the same time a very subtle and granular knowledge of what's happening on the ground in the country, and a willingness to find the prudent adaptation of the one to the other, rather than the simple and formulaic insistence that the principles can only mean government of certain dimensions, and any government programs that would have been baffling to Jefferson or Madison are therefore automatically things that we ought to be trying to undo.